I'm Chimoyo Mangazi with Business Time on Times. This is a magazine program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines. In today's program, inflation continues on a downward trend recorded at 20.8% in July. Also in the program, the Consumers Association of Malawi, Kama, describes water tariff adjustment as unjustifiable in the face of persistent service delivery challenges. We have these and other stories. Stay tuned. Malawi's annual inflation rate has continued its downward trend, falling to 20.8% in July from 21.1% in June 2026. However, a sharp rise in monthly prices is raising concern that the gains could come under pressure. We have more in this report.
Figures released by the National Statistical Office (NSO) show that annual inflation has fallen by 8.31 percentage points since October 2025, when it stood at 29.11%. The decline has largely been driven by easing food inflation, which fell from 32.38% in October last year to 14.3% in July this year. The inflation trend shows a significant moderation from October 2025, where annual inflation declined to 27.9% in November, 26% in December, 24.9% in January, 24.1% in February, and 23.8% in March. It temporarily increased to 24.3% in April before falling to 23.4% in May and 21.1% in June. However, the NSO says monthly inflation jumped to 2% in July from just 0.1% in June, with food prices rising by 2.9% compared with a decline of 0.3% in June. Non-food monthly inflation remained at 0.7%. The latest figures mean that while prices are increasing at a slower annual rate, households are still facing fresh price increases. Economics Association of Malawi President Betha Shigadza says the drop in inflation is a step in the right direction for the RBM's 22% target in 2026.
Actually, the drop in inflation is just a step in the right direction for the Reserve Bank of Malawi's 22.0% in 2026. Because if you remember, RBM set 22% for 2026. And as inflation is going down, we're just seeing that that's a step in the right direction. And the consistent decline in this inflation in the past months has just been largely due to the easing off of food inflation pressure. So as we are seeing that food inflation is going down, then it's also bringing down the overall inflation. So going forward, we believe that the onset of the lean season actually threatens this trend, because we might see that prices of maize, especially that food part, we might see maize going up, and then food inflation might also pick up. So this might actually amplify the food inflation because of the lean season. And also the renewed tensions in the Middle East, especially in terms of fuel prices, we might also see an increase in that side. So this might also have an impact on the overall inflation. But we are seeing the downward trend in inflation remaining vulnerable and also difficult to sustain in the coming months, especially because of these problems that we have just cited.
Economist Marvin Banda says the figures provide cautious encouragement because the disinflation process remains intact, but warned that the monthly increase needs attention.
The impression that I get is that we still need to be cautiously optimistic, because indeed we are celebrating a path of downward pressures on the consumer price index. And so when we see that, we do indeed celebrate, because when you compare the figures from last year, to now, you see that the inflation path is indeed downward going. However, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that the month-on-month inflation rose to about 2% from 0.1% the previous month. And if you also remember, the report also says that food inflation has increased to 2.9% from a negative 0.3% experienced in June. And also when you look at the non-food element, they're also saying that even though it's unchanged, it's 0.7. There's still pressure that you're going to get from there. And when you even dissect it further, when you look at the urban and the rural aspect of the inflation profile, you'll notice that there's still pressures that are building up. However, we take these numbers into context because we also know our agribusiness cycle. We expect that when you start getting into these months, food that was first harvested in the agriculture cycle in the beginning usually happens in the southern part of the country. And so when you then look at how the depletion of the food stock commences, you also see that it begins in the southern part. That's why you're seeing reports where food prices have began to increase in the southern part of the country.
Finance Minister Joseph Mwanamveka has set a more ambitious target, with government projecting inflation to 4 to 15% by the end of the 2026-27 financial year.
Tobacco estimates for this year has been revised downwards to 155 million kilograms from an earlier estimate of 197 million kilograms. Tobacco Commission spokesperson Teleforas Chigwenembe says the development addresses the fear of oversupply on the market. Chigwenembe explains.
As of Thursday this week, we are talking of 135 million kilograms of tobacco that has been sold, and this tobacco is valued at around $269 million US. And this tobacco has been sold at an average price of $2 per kilogram. And when you look at this against last year's sales, we see that we have gone down. The volumes, the average price, and the revenue have gone down by a significant percentage. The market has been in progress for 17 weeks now. At this point, the closing dates have not yet been set, but in the next few weeks we'll be announcing when we'll be closing this year's marketing season. The reason is that we believe that we are at an advanced stage of the marketing season because our projection from our third round of crop estimates survey shows that we will have 155 million kilograms of tobacco this year. And at this point, we have already sold 135 million kilograms of tobacco, which means that we only have about 20 to 25 million kilograms that remains unsold. And that will not need a lot of time. So we believe that in the next few weeks, we'll be announcing when we can close this year's tobacco marketing season. This year, we faced too many challenges. The first challenge was the rejection of tobacco on the auction system. From the first day of the marketing season, we saw that the rejection rate on the auction system was very high, and it's been high throughout the marketing season. The second challenge, and this was experienced especially in the first few weeks of the marketing season, we saw that in some cases it took long for farmers to get their money after selling their tobacco. So we engaged different players in the industry, AHL, who are the flows operator. We engaged the banks, and we engaged the tobacco buying companies. And we are happy to say that our monitoring shows that the situation has improved and farmers are getting their money, they're getting their proceeds within the period that is stipulated in the law. When we were opening the marketing season this year, the projection was 197 million kilograms of tobacco. But then, in the course of the marketing season, we went out again to conduct another crop estimate survey, which revealed that instead of 197 million kilograms, we're going to have 155 million kilograms of tobacco, which is a drop. Now, this has been caused by a number of reasons. That after we conducted the second round of crop estimate survey, we experienced a number of things in the fields. One, a lot of crop fields were attacked by diseases, or the diseases worsened. In some areas, there was continuous rain that caused leaching, and in Mzuzu division, in Mzuzu in the north, some farmers experienced post-harvest losses. They harvested their tobacco, but they did not have enough curing structures. So the care for the tobacco was compromised. And this is why we have seen a drop in the projection of the production for this year. So from 197 projected in the second round, we are going to have around 155 million kilograms of tobacco. As Tobacco Commission, we believe that this is not a big challenge, because we are at least assured that almost all the tobacco that is produced in the country this year will be sought. It would have been undesirable if we had produced more tobacco than what the tobacco buying companies are looking for, because tobacco buying companies are looking for 170 million kilograms of tobacco this year. So it would have been undesirable if we produced beyond the trade demand.
Meanwhile, 135 million kilograms of tobacco has been sold over the past 17 weeks, generating about $270 million. This is Business Time on Times. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Consumers Association of Malawi, KAMA, has challenged the recent water tariff increases, describing the adjustments as unjustifiable in the face of persistent service delivery challenges and calling on water boards to first address internal inefficiencies. It comes as the water boards have implemented tariff increases ranging from 11% to nearly 70%. KAMA Executive Director John Capito calls on water boards to first address operational inefficiencies such as non-revenue water losses and corruption before placing a greater financial burden on consumers. Benedetta Chuandamia spoke with Capito.
At a time when we are aware that delivery of water in Malawi is quite a challenge now, the parastatals that are involved in water supply in the country, be it Blantyre Water Board, Lilong Water Board, and the rest, have failed to meet the requirements, and they've failed also to meet their own mandate that they are established for. And in the past, we have had all these increases coming in, and we have failed to understand what has happened for them to fail, to continue failing to provide water delivery in the country. Some people in some areas are able to can stay for about 3 to 4 weeks without having water. Maybe that water will come at night. But some people, again, within these locations, Lilongwe, Blantyre, and Mzuzu, are unable to get clean water. Most of the water is muddy. Most of the water is not fit for consumption. And that puts together, including the failure to connect people. The scramble for water is always increasing as the population grows. and the water boards are still failing to connect people to water. And that is a big challenge. Now, we are again being told, we've been told that the government has approved new tariffs for the water boards. I think that becomes a challenge. Why can't government sit down and look at the previous tariff increases? Look at the type of delivery of service that they had done, and then be able to engage both the consumers and government itself, and understand what are our feelings, what are our interests at the moment, how have they been infringed upon. Now that, I think, was the role that we expected the government to start looking at before coming up with a tariff. You need to hear our experiences. You need to hear our pain. You need to hear again what are our concerns as regards to water supply. What are the main issues that people are talking about? If the water boards today cannot even connect you, I remember we are aware that most of the water boards had removed the meters from their clients, the prepaid meters, and they had indicated that there were these failures that were associated with those meters, and nothing has come on. And then we have now these fake bills that are coming on every time. People have got to complain. Now, a system that is so clean, or a system that is unable to address the consumer interests, becomes a challenge when it goes out again seeking increases from the same consumer who is bitter, who is angry, who is not satisfied with the current service. So we would want to understand as well, why should the government just think of increasing without then going internally within the institution to arrange some of the many inefficiencies that we see as associated with water supply. That to us is a big challenge that we expected government also to be thinking about the consumer, to be putting first the consumer, to say how best do we then accommodate these interests that are from consumers, to make sure that when we introduce a new tariff, or when we come up with a new tariff, that tariff is accepted by all consumers. But I think it's unfortunate that government simply goes out and then implements a policy that I think is unacceptable. Now, we would have loved to see a situation where both government and consumers are able to sit down. This is a specific product, a basic product, where consumers have got an interest in. It's a basic right. Now, that basic interest also promotes that people should be able to express themselves on any tariff that comes on. We are also mindful of the fact that we are aware that government wants to make sure that the water boards are resourced enough to make sure that they can deliver on their mandate, and therefore they need a tariff increase. But that does not stop the process of engaging people, hearing from them, and making sure that when you are introducing those tariffs, they are in tandem with what the people are thinking about. You need to hear their voice. You need to hear them. So they needed to have a system where they're able to capture what are the issues that we are talking about before they introduce a tariff. A tariff to me, a tariff to most consumers, is not an answer to the challenges that the water boards are facing. We needed to look at a number of reforms, issues to do with negligence. You have seen pipes bursting, and nobody cares about that water, where it is going to. And true now, most of the water boards are experiencing non-water loss, non-water revenue of about 60%. How would you have a parastatal pumping water 40%, 60%, and all that is going to waste? Only 30% goes to a consumer. All those inefficiencies are within the institution. They are not with me as a consumer. So why can't you address all those issues internally? And then when you are coming out, you are able to say, we have been able to address the following challenges that we have been facing. They are now failing to pay even electricity bills. They can't pay because they are operating carelessly. And you can't expect just a careless institution to be supported, to be bailed out every time it has been careless, to be bailed by the consumer. So you're putting so much pressure on one person, which is the consumer. And in a country where I think most people cannot access affordable and clean water, it's an insult.
Strict international quality and food safety standards, poor logistics, limited market information, and high transportation costs have been named as challenges facing horticulture farmers in their quest to penetrate the international market. But how far are such farmers willing to go to produce for the international market? A question for Chikondi Sinalo, a Blantyre-based horticulture farmer.
It's an organic farm that we are trying to mimic the closest we can be to nature. So our farming practices are directly linked to how nature works for plants. Okay, so at the moment we are doing what we call a micro concept farm. So what a micro concept farm means is it's a small area of a farm, but we are trying a lot of plants that we are working on here. So with your question, we are intending to expand to other larger modern farms that we can find around Blantyre or outside as well. So at the moment we have plants like Cape Splits cabbage. So this is a cabbage from South Africa especially, and this cabbage is doing quite well on our farm as well. We do have also plants like kale, which is in the family of rape, which is known here in Malawi as well. This is a vegetable, but it's quite common in Europe and South Africa as well. In addition to that, we also have herbs and spices. For example, lemongrass, we've got rosemary, we've got lavender, and all those have their uses in different industries. Well, in Malawi, we do have a market indeed, but I think it's underutilized. I think we rely so much on importing, let's say, all these produce from abroad, but we do have a lot of market here. For example, in the cosmetic industry, also in the food industry, they do need all these produces as well. The potential is very huge. I would say we might not know, but there are a lot of companies that do come in Africa and Malawi as well that are coming to get these crops and making their own produce. I will give you an example of a company called Holland and Barrett's. This is a European-based company, and they do go into Africa and collect different types of grains and herbs to make their own produce as well. The standards are quite high, per se. I think for you to be certified organic, you have to go through vigorous tests that you have to pass in order for you to be certified organic. I think the major challenge here in Malawi is that we need huge government support. We need to be intentional about organic produce and help our farmers in trying to get into the markets abroad. I would also encourage our government to see how much organic farming can do for this country, because as I've already said, like, there are companies coming into Africa. So many countries are benefiting from producing these organic produces and selling abroad.
Well, with that item, we've come to the end of today's edition of Business Time here on Times Television. It is a magazine program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. On behalf of the entire production team, I am Chimoyo Mangazi. But always remember, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. Bye for now.